Oliver Fade takes it there, contains strong language, intense violence, and is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome. This is Oliver Fade, and I'm bringing you the podcast that speaks the truth about the streets.
What you doing on our turf? What you doing on our turf?
Hello, welcome to another episode of our podcast that takes it to the streets. This time we have a guest by the name of Soul Chicago, a friend of mine who's Soul Chicago, Sochi, spelled XO Chicago. Hi, Sochi. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I guess
Here we are. Here we are, my friend.
we're gonna have to talk about the dark side of your life.
That's okay. I'm ready for it. I kind of had a little mental breakdown the first time that we had a conversation on my story, and I'm ready to let it out.
Okay. Well, thanks again. Sochi and I, we've known each other for well over 10 years. We met through music. She's a musician, artist, singer. She's gone through a lot, and I'd like for you to share your story with us and the audience to help, bring to light what these streets are really about. And I know that one of the biggest, most traumatic things of your life had to do with the father of your first child. Mm-hmm. So can we talk about that? Would you like to share something about that?
For sure, yeah. So first and foremost, I come from the southeast side of Chicago. It is an old Mexican neighborhood, Mexican American, but it was a very flourished neighborhood with lots of nationalities. People from all over the world came to South Chicago to work in the steel mills, and I grew up in the aftermath of the end of the Industrial Revolution. We grew up in a time that there was no security. There was no. There was an uprise in violence, in gangbanging, in drug use, and although I did live in a fairly healthy home, when you're surrounded by so many dark things, it makes it so normal. It becomes a point to where it's like, oh, well, this is just everyday things. Because, with me growing up, I grew up in the early 2000s. I went to Washington High School, I knew so many people. I had friends that were gangbangers or that didn't like each other. I had family members that were involved in multiple, gangs. And it does seem like it's normal. It's like, these are friends. These are people that I go to school with, and I think that at a certain point in time, when we look at how Chicago is portrayed on a national level, it's this violence and ugly.
Gangster city.
Right, but you're also talking about people's friends, people's family members, brothers, sisters,
right. Real
uncles,
people.
Yeah, who have people that genuinely love them, and you think about the gang culture, and it's like automatically they're evil people. They need to be thrown away. They need to be locked up. But these are people that we fall in love with. We meet on a genuine level, and a lot of us are dealing with something deeper than the prosthetics or the visuals of what they think it is.
Right. Right.
Trauma in Chicago does not start singly. It's not a single issue. It's not like, it's over time. It's the attitude, it's the pessimism, it's the lack of encouragement. It's the thought that the system is against us. It's that continued thing to where it's like, if I don't go out and hustle myself, how am I going to move forward? That life is not for me, you know?
Yeah.
So when I was about 16 years old, I was cool with a bunch of different people. My son's father, I met him because my best friend at the time liked him. She was, back in the day, it was like,
Was this in
kicking
high
it.
school?
Yeah.
Okay.
In high school. I mean, it was nothing serious, but you remember back in the day, it was like, oh, we
Sure,
kicking it,
sure.
like, oh, we kicking it, like we ain't together, but we kicking it. So she,
In Chicago, that means you are messing around.
Yeah, just
In
like-
California, that means you're hanging out, like with your friends.
Right.
So if there's anybody out there that doesn't understand, kicking it means you're at least kissing.
Yeah, right. It doesn't mean that you might not have gone all the way, but so she dated him, and he was at the time a crew banger. So in Chicago, you do have larger gangs, right? You have the larger gangs that are well known, and I mean, if you don't know Chicago gang culture, it's split up into pretty much two sects, peoples and folks. And gangs smaller sect gangs run under either the folks or under the 5 or the 6. So at the time, he was just a crew banger, and crew bangs were like gangs. They were like smaller sects of some of the larger gangs. So he was
Like a party crew.
Yeah, it was like a party crew. It was like they got together and then they'd fight other party crews. And in the Southeast side, there was a ton of
It's like training. You're training
Right.
for the big
Right,
leagues.
right, pretty much. And some kids don't wind up turning out and they just stick with who they were with, but there's a lot of kids that are pretty much forced to. And Alex was a kid who grew up without his father. His mother was barely around. He was raised by his mother's grandparents, so he had a lot of trauma just on his upbringing. Poor, very poor. Didn't necessarily have that love. I know that his grandfather did love him a lot, but to not have that that affection from a parent to lean on, where do you go? You go out, if you're, 13, he was 12, 13, 14 years old, out on the street already because his parents didn't, nobody was
So he
really
had to
watching
find his family.
his family, right? And he genuinely was a sweet person. He was a goofball. I'm a big goofball too. So it's like, when you're in love in Chicago, you talk shit, like you roast each other, like, and that was what we did. And I genuinely loved him. And eventually him and all his friends were forced to turn out king, and it changed a lot of things.
And that's a normal thing to be forced.
Right. And I don't think a lot of people realize the extremities of some of these things. You're talking about people that you've known for years, I think that he was in his crew since he was maybe like 13, 14 years old. So by the time you're 17, now you're up for the big leagues, and you can't, you either you turn over or you're gonna get your ass beat all the time. Like,
Right. Your own friends telling you they're gonna beat your ass if you don't turn.
Right. And essentially he was down for his shit, like, and he wasn't a person that showed that soft, vulnerable side that he showed me, that I had the pleasure of knowing, and I'm thankful for that, right? Because when we're villainizing these young kids, which he was a child, right? 17, 18, we got together when I was 16, he was 17 years old. That's a kid, and to think about the pressures of having to speak on grown men, you got grown men telling you what to do now because you don't have a mother and father at home to like take care of yourself.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like that's some intense shit. And he didn't like being broke, you know? So he was a hustler, but a lot of people liked him, you know? Like I feel like a lot of people rocked with him on a genuine level. He started, you know, making money, and you know, when me and him had my son Frank, we had already gone through some trauma. So I had gotten pregnant in, I want to say, January of 2015, and I got an abortion. And then I got pregnant again when I was like, again, doing some heavy shit. You're
The
around
first
the
time
neighborhood.
that you got pregnant was by him.
Both of them.
Oh, okay.
By him. And, you know, being in the lifestyle in Chicago, I was chilling with gangbangers too. We were partying, you know, like these were my dogs. I never, you know, thank God I never did, you know, get jumped in, or I never claimed anything or anything like that. But like,
Did they try to turn you
no,
out? Or were
I think that people respected me. You know, I like feel thankful that I have like people that I can consider friends that really did look out for me
Yeah,
after
yeah.
all of, you know, my shit happened. Like, you know, you don't realize at that time, because it's like, these are your dogs, these are your cousins, these are your friends, they're your homies that you've known forever, that you've grown up with. And, you know, essentially you get thrown into things, you know? So like I was doing, you know, I started fucking around with, you know, I was chilling with people older. And of course it's like, all right, you start off one thing. If you're drinking, what else are you doing? By the time I was like 18, I started partying. And you know, that's another level, right? So the second time around, I was like, I can't do it again. So by the time I had my son,
You mean an abortion?
twice, yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. It was like the first time we did it because it was like, okay, it's, you know, it's not right? It's like I'm too young and stuff like that.
So you decided to keep your child, which is Frank,
which is Frank.
who's listening.
Yes.
What's up, Frank?
Who's listening right now, who's with me. But yeah, and so he could have had two older siblings that would have been here. And that's obviously a decision now that still lives with me. You know what I mean? And for me to have my son, he was already at that point. He had already lost a really good friend of him. His, you know, by the time I was 17, which I'm sure just like you, we lost people to this game. You know, it was like people got killed. People were, you know, getting locked up. And there was race wars happening at the time at Washington High School for years. A good friend of mine lost her brother right outside of Washington High School. His name was Washington. His last name was Washington. But these are things that are just so normalized, right? So once I decided to have my son, he was already deep in, right?
How old was he?
When we had Frank, he was 19. I was
Okay.
18.
Okay.
I was 18 years old and he was 19. And
So Alex was already deep in the game.
deep in the game. Deep in the game.
You mean deep in the game, like drug dealing?
Drug dealing, most likely pretty much drug dealing, you know.
Maybe even having some soldiers under him.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And he was well respected, you know, and a lot of people didn't like him because he didn't play around, you know, like it was
What kind of drugs?
coke.
Coke.
I'm sure.
Yeah, well that's a heavy.
Yeah, I'm sure coke. But the thing was that after I had my son, I was like, all right, I can't do it, right? I was pregnant with my kid, and the last time that I stopped for him, I used to, you know, see him out on the block, which, you know, a lot of people don't understand that these are organized affiliations. You have to log in hours. You have to be out on the block.
Right.
You have to learn, you know, it's like learning a company's motto or something, you know. It's like
you take turns. Who's on security?
who's
this
on
time?
security,
Who's
but you gotta
switching?
there's functioning to these, you know. You have statements that you have to learn and recite. I remember, you know, him having pamphlets of, you know, there's certain things that you have to do. You have to like place a stamp on your body by the time you're a certain age, you know? You have to show that you're serious. You have to log those hours. So he used to be out on the block all the time, and it scared me so much because I loved him. I loved who he was. I didn't want him out there. For a while before I got pregnant, he was away for a while. But then his good friend got killed. He was only 15 years old. He got killed, ran over by a car at Man Park. And it flipped a switch. And he just did not give a fuck. So after going through all that trauma, and, you know, I was going through my own shit, you know, growing up, learning, fucking around with people who did drugs, people that were adults that probably I shouldn't have been hanging around with.
Yeah.
But that's just what it is, right? It was just so much for him. So when I stopped to talk to him for the last time, pop, 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 right on 104th and L. And the same block that I winded up getting robbed at, mind you, years later. 4 years, 3 years later, not
So
knowing.
you're pregnant.
I'm pregnant.
And you
he
drove
jumps
by
in the
the-
car, and his friends are out on the corner, and sure enough, gunshots. And he jumps out the car and he looks at me dead in my face and he tells me, "See, this is what the fuck I mean. This is the reason why I don't fucking want you around here. Get the fuck out of here."
So he didn't want you around.
He didn't want me around. He already knew how.
He knew the dangers, and he's
the
like, "Stay
dangers.
away from me."
Right. So essentially, I feel like that saved both of our lives because he was already so deep in it. I remember even after I had my son, I tried stopping one time, and he politely came up to the car and he told me, he's like, "Soch, you remember what happened last time? Get the fuck out of here." And I stood away from him. You know, that's when I started working and hustling and doing all these things so I can take care of my kid. By the time my son was 6 months, I had my own place. I didn't want to live with my parents. I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want somebody to look at me and be like, "Oh, you're a single mother, so you're not going to do shit with your life." Because that's what people do, right? Mm-hmm. That's what people do. That's what we're used to. We're not used to encouragement. We're used to people telling us, "Oh, she had a kid."
Right,
Now
just
she-
like so and so, they compare you to somebody and
For
then
sure.
try to, yeah.
For sure. And
It's on you to bring yourself up.
right, but the pressure that put on myself, right? So we had our own space, you know, I moved out, I had our own space, and in October of 2008, my son's father was killed in his home with his best friend. It was just him and his best friend. He had to be comfortable because he was playing video games at the time. Somebody shot him once in the head. And then they waited for his friend to be he was taking a shit in the bathroom, and they waited for his friend to go to the bathroom. So his best friend Moose he got it worse. And, you know, again, it's like,
So when you say he had to be comfortable, somebody they knew committed the crime. Somebody they knew
I would say the very
killed
next
him.
the very next
You
day,
think that whoever killed him knew him?
I think so, for sure. For sure. I had a chance to see the apartment the very next day, and I never was around him or anything like that, but I had an opportunity and somebody had invited me to go. A friend of mine had invited me to go. And I went, and I, you know, the body wasn't there or anything. It was after everything was cleaned up, but I seen the layout. There was no way. He was not stupid. You know, there was no forced entry. It was nothing like that. And, you know, it's a horrible thing to think about, but it's like, okay, this is my reality, right?
So his own gang turned on him.
Possibly, or somebody. He was making money from what I know.
Oh, over money, over
Maybe
drugs?
maybe.
Did he do something and they
I don't
retaliated?
know.
Or
I don't
was
know.
this
I don't know the full story because I really didn't spend time around him. But I know that he was making good money, and then afterwards, I winded
Drug
up
dealing,
right.
drug money.
Afterwards, I winded up finding out that he was off. Like from what I know, a few days before he was like off, and he moved all his weight. He moved his weight. He moved his money. He had everything at his house. So when
Something was off.
something was off, and he knew it. But they also, whoever did that, maybe tried to find some money or something, didn't find it, and you know, I had to deal with the loss of losing somebody that I genuinely loved. You know, my son was 2 years old at the time, and this is somebody that I made a human with, right? And I don't have the support of people around me because they're all like, well, he didn't fucking take care of your kids, so why the fuck are you crying for? You know?
Yeah.
And 8 months later, I got robbed for myself when my son was in my house. And from what I know, it was two different gangs that did it. They did it without the approval of their heads, because, you know, and whenever you're doing stuff like this, organized crime is organized. You got to go through people. You can't just run and do things for no
Right,
reason.
you need permission.
You need permission. And people did it, you know, I when I go back to think about me just laying down in my bed.
But
and
why would they
out,
rob you? What did they rob, or what was?
I feel like somebody found out that I was his. He kept it very secretive.
You were targeted.
I believe I was targeted. Yeah. And I believe somebody, whoever it was like, oh, that's Cheeks' baby mom or whatever. That's old girl. You know, she must have money. She's living on her own, you know? And I was
Yeah.
broke at the time.
Maybe you have the stash.
Right. And they ransacked my house. They
Did
tied
you have
me
the
up.
stash?
No, the most that they found in my house was roaches. I had roaches all over my house after they took my TV. They took all my shit.
So what did they take?
They took my box TV. They took a broken stereo. The most that they took...
The heaviest TV available.
Yeah. The most that they took from me was my DVD collection. Like, I had a bomb. And, you know, and back in the
Oh
day,
my
that
God.
was probably valuable.
They took
I had
your
like
DVDs.
I had like all seasons of In Living Color on DVD. I had
I mean, this
everything.
sounds like you know, goofballs.
They were kids.
Who's gonna steal?
They were
If
kids.
they go there for some work and then they take your DVDs, it just kind of
Well, because
like,
when they don't
wow.
have anything, you can't just walk into somebody's house, pistol whip a girl, fucking tie her up.
Pistol whipped you.
Yeah,
So you were robbed at gunpoint.
at gunpoint. So I had a plan to stay up. I had my first date with my husband, my now husband, who I've been with for, you know, since this day, and we consider this
Yeah,
day
yeah.
our anniversary date. Our first date was
Which was
the Saturday before
okay.
this happened. This happened on March 21st. It was a Thursday. So Thursday he was going to get off of work. He was going to come by. I had just got out from the studio. I got home. My phone was dead, so I plugged it in and I sat down on my bed to like file my nails. Like natural. I was going to get up, take a shower. He's going to come by afterwards. We're going to chill. We're going to relax. I knocked out on my bed. Like God put me to sleep. Like, I swear to God, I was not freaking out. I was calm. How I'm talking to you right now. I don't have shit in my house. Get the fuck out of my house. You know, and I wasn't afraid. I was ready to die that day. I woke
So
up.
you fell asleep.
I
and
fell
you-
asleep
you
and I woke up to two men in my home. It was more men, but two men in my face with pistols, hat, you know, snapbacks and bandanas over
And
their
who's all in the
face.
house?
My son is downstairs sleeping on the couch.
So just you and your son.
Just me and my son. And I wake up and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing at my house? And there was a guy who was like, oh, we know who the fuck you are, bitch. Where the fuck's the shit? You know, who the fuck was here and all this shit. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I'm a single mom. I barely have anything. Like, take whatever the fuck you want. Get the fuck out my house. Dude didn't like that I wasn't like freaking out. Scared. So he's like, shut the fuck up, bitch. Get on your stomach. Right then and there, I thought that I thought I was about to get raped. I thought, you know.
Yeah.
I get on my stomach on the bed and I'm like, what? I'm like, stop. I'm like, you can take whatever. Shut the fuck up, bitch. Pistol whip me. I didn't realize it was pistol whip. And at the time, it didn't even feel like
So
it
he
hurt.
hit you with a gun and
Yeah,
on
but I
your
thought
head?
that on my head. He hit me on my head. I didn't know what he hit me with, but in my head, I was like, you little bitch, that didn't even hurt. But it's fucked up. But so, you know, they got me up and I had noticed that they grabbed some shoelaces off my shoes. They put a shirt over my head. Now, mind you, in a shirt, you got a big hole for where your head goes. That was open on one of my eyes, you know.
So you can still see.
I could still see. They were amateurs.
God.
They were
Oh my
kids,
God.
you know.
Yeah.
Put me into the other room and they tied me up. And I was on my stomach in my son's. I had like a larger closet area.
What did they tie you up with?
Shoestrings from my
Oh.
shoes. I had like
Oh,
when I
okay.
was walking.
They
into
didn't come in with their own.
No,
rope.
I seen they took my shoes and took my shoestrings out before they woke me up. So as I'm in the closet, there's another voice that wasn't there because as we walked into this room, there was another guy in there, and I'm hearing.
So there's a third person.
I'm hearing ransacking. So as all of this is happening, I'm hearing drawers opening. So there's no way that there couldn't have been any less than at least 4 people in the house, in my house at the time. You know, and I'm on my stomach, and this guy is like, everything's going to be okay. And it made me feel like they knew who I was. Like, I don't know
He
who.
kind of felt for you.
I think that they came into my house not realizing who I was. A lot of people didn't know that I was this man's. Like, we never were together like that. Like, oh, you know, it's not like social media where we weren't. People knew, but I'm also known for. I chilled with so many people. I was cool with everybody.
You're known outside of him.
Him, right? So it's like, you know, I had this person in my house, and it's like, damn, right? Damn, I feel comfortable. Not comfortable, but he was calming my nerves a bit. They winded up tying me up. They tied me up to a chair. And he's one of the asshole who pistol whipped me. He started rubbing something against my arm as I'm blindfolded, you know, I'm gagged right now. And he's like, do you feel that right now? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's your ID and your social security card. If you call the cops right now, I'm going to come back and I'm going to kill you.
Shit.
So I'm like, just take whatever you want. And in my mind, this is fucked up, but in my mind, I'm like, just please don't take my car. I have to work tomorrow.
That's your hard Mexican blood talking.
Like, when I tell, like, at that moment, that's what it was like. All right, they're just like, I'm not saying shit, right? Mm-hmm. So they finally leave, and that's when I start crying, and I'm screaming for my son because he's still downstairs on the couch. I'm like, Frank, you know, and I'm like, they fucking took my baby, like, they took my son. Like, he's not saying nothing, and my son was never like a deep sleeper like that, and I finally get loose from some. I had already been loose on my feet. I just hit it. I didn't try to fight them when they were in there. So I got out. I went downstairs and he was knocked out on the couch.
Frank was asleep.
Sleep.
So he didn't hear or see
No,
anything.
they took everything.
Oh, wow.
They took everything. They ransacked the entire fucking house and my son was still sleeping. That was Lord knows that was God. And to the point where I had to like push him and I thought that they like drugged him or something because he was just knocked out cold.
You're like checking him and seeing
Right.
if he's good.
Ran outside and I started screaming for help and my neighbor helped me and first phone call, I don't know what I did. I called my husband Todd and he was from East Chicago to the east side in 6 minutes. Ran every light to get to me. He picked me up. He respected my decision to...
This is like him first getting to know you.
Right.
Because it's your first date.
Right, like first...
And this is his experience with you.
Yeah.
And he decided to marry you. Interesting.
Right. So
That's amazing.
yeah,
Though. He was there for you.
Yeah, and he came to pick me up. And again, I was so afraid. I didn't want to. I left my son with my neighbor because I didn't want to walk out and have somebody shoot me. I didn't know at the time. I thought that it was like personal. It's like, you know, you have somebody in your house and violates your space. I didn't know what was going to happen. So calling the cops right now, you know, and these people have my ID, which has my parents' address on it. Like,
damn.
that's too much. That,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I wasn't trying to deal with that. So
Yeah,
I
they
called
just
him.
threatened
He
you
picked
and-
me up. Yeah. He picked me up. I had left my son with my neighbor and my cousin came to pick him up from there, and I'm at his house, and my landlord calls me and says, the police want to talk to you, because obviously the landlord has something like that happens.
Very tough.
Yeah.
Very tough situation.
Todd takes me to the 4th District Police Station, and I stood there for the next 4 to 6 hours being interrogated like I was a criminal.
Interrogated.
Yeah, they knew who my son's father was, and they pretty much told me, hey, you see all these? They threw out some pictures on the table.
I mean, you're obviously the victim here.
Right, I just had this
You were robbed at gunpoint.
Right. And they're showing me pictures of men, 2 of which I knew. And they're saying, you see these men right here? These are the people that killed your son's father. Those are the people that were in your house. I'm not stupid. I know how this shit works. I don't know who was in my house right now. Like, I didn't. At that point in time, I didn't know why. I pay my taxes. I pay their salary at that point in time, And I'm being treated like a criminal. Of course, they had the nice guy come out. Oh, yeah, everything's going to be okay. But this is who it is, right? And then they had the female cop come out. And she's like, bitch, we know who the fuck you're over here saying you're innocent. I just got robbed at gunpoint while my son was in this. What are you talking about? And thank God I had my husband with me. I had Todd with me at the time. And Todd, before we met, his entire life he wanted to be a police officer, and he was a Hammond police officer for 6 months, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it.
Wow.
It was too much of the hierarchy. He's a fly-byer. He does this. He dances to the beat of his own drum. He doesn't like that, and there's a lot of hierarchy when it comes to the police department. He couldn't deal with it, so he stood up for me, and he's like, I spent time in the force. How dare all of you treat this woman like this? She's coming into you. The only reason she was afraid, I picked her up and she was this and she was that, and he had my back. And that's something, he protected me, and he's been protecting me ever since that day. But something like that happens to you, it's a trigger effect, right? I started working. We were together, and it's this brand new life, and I didn't tell nobody. I told you, I don't like being a victim. Don't cross me out as that victim.
Well, I mean, I never knew this happened to you, and I've known you forever, and then all of a sudden we got the podcast, and I'm, and then she's got a story to tell.
Yeah, Gina's telling you, yeah, she's fucked up. Shout out to Gina. Yeah, Sochi got a fucked up story. You're going to want to talk to her.
That's one way to introduce Sochi to the show, Gina.
So that situation and losing my son's father, that's a lot, And when we are programmed to just be complacent with these things, right? And it was. A lot of people were like, oh, she met this new dude. She left the east side. Like, no, I was afraid for my life. It took me a very long time to get back into my old neighborhood because I was afraid.
But you weren't, like, okay.
I wasn't okay.
You're going through something severe and hiding it well. How is it coming out? Like you're somehow, are you crying in the shower? Like, what are you doing? Because it's gotta come out somehow.
I was working. I was a worker. By the time I met you in 2011, I was doing shows. I was hosting. I started working with Urban Grind. I was on the move, and I still had a 9 to 5. And in 2014, in October of 2014, one of my closest cousins passed away. We were only 4 months apart or something like that, and we spent a lot of our childhood together. We were really close, and he died in a car accident, and it came to the forefront. It's like I felt like I lost.
You couldn't hold it.
I felt like I lost a piece of my childhood, and here's this horrible situation that's bringing everything out to light. So by that point, like I said, I held it good. Oh, I was good. People thought I was a model. People, I had this perfect marriage, and I had this, and then it was like, blow up. I'm not okay. I'm not sleeping well. After 11, 12 years, I started messing around with coke again after my
So you
cousin
turned to
passed away.
drugs.
I turned to drugs, alcohol. I was an insomniac. And at the same time, I was preaching about PTSD, and I had after school programs, and I was working with
So
Safe
you're aware.
Haven.
You're aware, but you're in a way making it worse for yourself.
For sure. I was talking about PTSD when I was still dealing with my substance abuse, and it was bad, and nobody, to the point where nobody knew. Todd didn't know. I didn't admit this to my husband until maybe 2 years ago.
Wow.
That's heavy, you know? And I was losing my relationship with my kid. I was losing my relationship with my family. I didn't feel comfortable in my own home. I didn't think that marriage or being a wife was meant for me. That's a lie. That's a lie that's built in. After a while, we broke up for a little while, moved out with my son, started reevaluating life, had extreme situations around me where it was like I was so involved in chaos, and I had like a nervous breakdown. And thank God for my boss, Chuck Candiano. He gave me a week off, and he gave me his number to his most trusted therapist, and I started speaking with her in 2015, and it didn't stop right away. You know, it took some time. It took
So you went to
many
therapy?
years. Yeah, it took many years after 2015. You know, going
And
consistently.
what do you think about therapy? Is therapy helpful?
I think that therapy helped me. She helped me so much at the time for what I needed. But I feel like as an evolving person who has PTSD, it's not something that just falls away.
Right. You have to live with it.
You have to live with it. It's a daily thing.
Forever.
Right. And so I was with her for about 7 years, and she did really well for me. But
So it did help you.
it did help me, but I still have, so more than recently, about a year ago, I had one of my last sessions with her, and she was great to me. My relationship, but I would go through these things, right? So my dad got into a really bad accident, 2021. Yeah. He is now paralyzed from his neck down. And I had to step up and take care of him and do all that stuff. So after he left, I turned manic again. And it was like, what, I have idle hands. It's like idle hands. It's like I was just dealing with my father who's in my house, and I'm working in my house. I'm dealing with all this stuff. And then it's like, now what do I do?
Yeah.
So then it gets back into we have these moods. So she goes, well, I've been thinking about this for a long time. And I've always told her I've been against taking pills. I didn't want to take pills because no, what can I do? Let me find things, breathing techniques. And she has, like, having anxiety. For the first few years, every time I would start anxiety, I would repeat the alphabet 4 times in a row to calm my anxiety.
Forms of meditation. I started doing meditation and working out, which helped, but that's only a maintenance thing. You know, that's only a maintenance thing because it always comes back. You never know what's going to happen in your life to where it's going to bring you to... It's going to trigger it, right? So she told me, well, I've been thinking about this for a while, and, you know, I think that you've done really good at hiding it, but I think you might be bipolar too. Maybe it might be good to speak with a psychiatrist so he can give you pills, like, you know, a small dosage, you know, just to kind of calm your nerves. And that was the moment that I decided I had to take a step back. Because as a creative, I refuse to jump into another substance. Yeah.
To cure anything that in my heart I know it's not right. And right before,
but overall, you're agreeing with the therapy, a method to help. And the reason I'm bringing it up like that is so if there's listeners that are dealing with this sort of stuff.
I think that therapy does help. I think that she helped me with everything that I needed. But the main therapy that I needed, honestly, a week before my dad's accident, I started going to church again. And, you know, I don't want to hold on to this weight anymore. I've been holding on to weight for a very long time. And it's shit that I've blamed myself for, right? I hated myself for the decisions that I made with my son's father, with my kid. I hated myself for the decisions I made for my children that aren't here. I've hated myself for the decisions that I made and the bad decisions that I put against what I believed for myself.
Yeah.
I don't want it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want it anymore.
So church helps you.
Honestly, I feel like I don't want to see myself the way that I see myself anymore. I want to see myself the way that God sees me and my potential, because he loves me and I feel that. But I also know that I have to hold myself accountable.
That means you love yourself then.
I do love myself, but sometimes I don't.
Right, I got you.
Not all the time. I love myself. I believe in myself, no doubt. But I don't believe in myself that I feel like I can do this alone, because I don't want to. I don't want that weight.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want no pressure. And now I feel like with that, now that I have the word,
Yeah.
I'm able to do God's work. I'm able to help other people. I'm able to speak to you right now. Because God knows.
So it gives you strength.
For sure.
Okay.
Because it gives me strength by letting go. I don't have any, I don't want what doesn't want me. Like, there ain't no pressure no more. You know, I feel like before I was like worried about what everybody else wanted for me and what's popular, what's going to get me more of this, how I'm going to look, what's going to be no, I don't want it. I want to just be. I want to have conversations like this with you.
And it's amazing because you're doing it.
Period. That's it. That's
So,
all we're trying to do, you know?
what's up.
If I'm able to open up and be vulnerable, which has helped me, you know, writing has helped me. I have just told your coworker, you know, I'm changing. This is a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
You know, me learning how to read books. I finally, after a year of reading this book, it's the hardest book, and we just finished having this conversation. Reading for me, as somebody with like ADD, PTSD, ADHD, it's not the easiest thing to do, but I've trained myself to find relaxation within reading and knowledge.
That's
and
awesome.
getting that, which is great, right? But I've been reading this book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's the hardest book that I've ever had to read because it deals with PTSD on all levels, how it affects the
okay.
brain.
I'm going to have to check that out.
It's taken me forever to read. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff that I don't understand. You have to kind of go back and forth. There's a lot of medical terms in it. But it's interesting for me to be able to read about other people's childhood traumas, you know, rape, like horrible things of other people. That would have triggered so much for me 5 years ago, you know?
Oh, I see.
I got to give myself credit where credit's due, you know? And I think that right now we are living in a world that is opening up about mental health and awareness.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that it makes it less that important, right? Like, if you're going through anxious problems, if you have bad anxiety, you're depressed, don't talk about how you're depressed if you're not putting into yourself on a daily basis. I have reminders.
You mean to heal?
To heal.
Not to commit suicide.
No, I'm talking about helping
I
yourself
gotcha.
as a whole. What can I do? Go to the gym. Get some cardio in. Doing 4 times a week, 20 minutes, 4 times a week of cardio is the same as taking one antidepressant every single day. Why is it that there's more antidepressants and drugs out there for depression and suicide rates have not gone down?
There's a lot of money in depression.
There's a lot of money in the pictures, but at the same time, what are we doing to educate ourselves, right?
Right.
So I'm trying to teach myself. I'm learning about gardening, about the earth. I'm finding time
Awesome.
outside in nature. I'm learning how to meditate. I pray the rosary every day. I've been doing that for the last 6 months. And that's just 15 minutes of mine to remind myself why Jesus Christ came and died for me and all the pain that I've given myself.
Well, you're practicing being well. You're
and it has to be
practicing.
a practice. It has to be an action. It can't just be verbal. You know, right now for Lent, I let go of alcohol for 40 days. Alcohol has played a major role in a lot of pain in my life.
Yeah.
And this is big for me.
Yeah.
My husband sells alcohol for a living. You know, we might not have food in the house, but we got a bottle or two.
Yeah. Yeah.
So right now it's just a matter of what am I doing on a daily basis? You asked me earlier, how are you so happy?
Yeah. I mean, I ask people
Yo,
how it is that they.
I
deal with things.
intentionally have to be happy. I have reminders on my phone that go off every day that tell me that I'm great. Let's see. What does it say right now? What does my mantra tell me right now?
So you tell yourself.
I
this.
trust my intuition.
You bring yourself up.
I
That's
trust my
what's up.
intuition. Like I'm pulling this into my mind on a regular basis. I'm learning tricks so I can help myself. And once I start helping myself, I'm able to help others. The
Well,
fact
you're
that I am
helping
here,
others now
fact-
by talking about this.
For sure.
You telling us,
and
listeners hopefully can learn how to cope, how to deal, at least a little bit from this conversation.
thankful for you, for people like you who are giving me the space to be able to do this. Like, I live a really cool life. Like, I feel like I've known you for a long time. I've done a lot of cool things. I like to sing. I play with 2 bands. Like, I'm a creative. I'm on the board for the Jones Center, which is a community center in Chicago Heights.
Yeah.
Like, I
Very cool.
worked with kids. I'm starting a coalition to bring education and knowledge back to the neighborhood that I love so we can change the narrative, so we can teach people how to keep a calendar, how to be organized, because I never had that. My life was always chaos. But until you learn how to organize the mess a little bit, organize it. I'm type A. I'm like free as a bird. Or no, type B, whatever. Type A is very meticulous. I'm like, I make decisions on the run. And that's not good. That's not a good thing to be when you can't just be like, oh yes, I'm going to do everything. You have to.
Well, you're doing great things, and I'm glad you're on the show.
Thank you.
So thank you for
Thank you.
coming to the show.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. And I think that, right now, Fade, we've known each other for a long time. And these are the conversations that maybe we should have had 10 years ago,
right.
Maybe these
Hey,
are the
we're having them. We're having them.
And that's the beautiful thing about it. We're still evolving. I wouldn't have been able to speak to you right now on the way that I need to, but everything happens for a reason. God put me in this chair to speak with you, to speak with all of the people who are going to be listening, just to have that open conversation. And that's a beautiful thing. If we can just have these conversations, and we've been talking for the last 2 hours today, we had another 2-hour conversation because we can just go.
Yeah, right.
Why can't we continue to do this with each other? We cannot. One thing that we will always need is companionship. We need companionship. Step away from your phone, step away from social media, start tracking what you're doing with your life. And mind you, it's all aspects. My life was in ruins when Todd met me, and I had to really learn how to fix my finances, how to build my career, how to build a business,
See your future?
Oh, absolutely. I see a great future that feels fucking easy. You know why? Because my job here, I had somebody ask me well, you have to focus on one thing. And I'm like, fuck that. Fuck that. I'm an artist. I'm a creative. But my main thing is my access to people, service to people. I want to do God's work, and I want to be able to show love to those who feel like they don't have it. Because I feel that way too,
Yeah.
And we're probably most hard on listen, you can say whatever you want. Anybody can say horrible things about me, right? Mm-hmm. I guarantee you, I tell myself worse. There's nothing than anybody else can say to me that I haven't told myself 4 times over.
You hear that, everybody? Y'all ain't shit. Okay, well, we're gonna wrap up with that.
Yeah.
And
Thank you so much. And, I did want to let your listeners know, I do appreciate the time out here, Fade. This is important.
yes, of
It's
course,
needed.
thank you for being here.
It's
with us.
needed. If you are looking for some guidance, I do have a blog, a written blog, where I've kind of talked about some of my experiences and just day-to-day things on my website at mrsxochicago.com. I also have a business website, so if you're interested or you're available for podcasts like this, if you're, working on a project to help the city of Chicago or surrounding areas, please make sure to reach out, xochicagolLC.com, xochicagolLC@gmail.com. I appreciate the time, Fade, and
Cool.
yeah,
Thank you,
hopefully we
Sochi.
get some, we change some hearts, we show some love, and
Oh, we will.
and
Definitely. Thanks for
and,
listening.
and bring some light to Chicago, because we need
Oh,
it.
yeah.
We need it.
And thanks for listening. We're going to end it with Sochi's song Trauma
Trauma.
by Soul Chicago.
South Chicago girl living on her own. Everything seemed right until everything went wrong. The picture in my head doesn't wanna go away, and any little thing seems to take me to the grave. Tied up with fears locked inside, threatened and left there to die. The devil tried to question my faith, but I squared up with death staring back at my face. Trauma, living through my trauma. Nothing can be undone. Living through my trauma, trauma, trauma. Living through my trauma. Nothing can be undone. Living through my trauma. For the little boy who watches his big brother, searching for the love, so he runs and finds another way to ease the pain. The streets are shooting down and